March 26th meeting of Health and Education. This is our annual joint meeting with Budget and with Health and Education. Everyone is welcome to ask questions and participate in the discussion, but for voting purposes, this is exclusively a Health and Education meeting. Okay. All right, first order of business is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Need a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Very good. All right, none of the other committees are reporting tonight, so our only item for discussion is the school board. So, Mr. Odom, Mr. Sanford, you're up.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. We're glad to have you with us tonight, and we please ask any questions that you might have. We're very open to that, but we want to share some things with you to begin with. We'll have the GPS budget. We do need to take a look at the capital projects budget, which will probably be maybe a separate motion for you. I'm not sure. Cafeteria fund, which is separate, the federal. Then we do have some building fund amendments that we'd like to cover tonight, so we could do that. I would like to begin with you just briefly, if we could. There's a letter from me there that just point out some things, and I'm not going to read to you tonight, but Rutherford County Schools is one of the things that along with Westbury City Schools, the MTSU, the educational availability in Rutherford County is one of the things that draws people to Rutherford County. And I think we realize that is something we want to maintain. If you ever get behind, one of my staff said today, we're getting to be a large district, and if you ever take your foot off the pedal, you can get behind. You can be a Chattanooga or Hamilton County or something like that, because we're about the same size they are. So we want to think about that. But some things that just really I want to point out to you just very quickly. You know, the Central Magnet School was named the 4th best high school in Tennessee, 278th best in U.S. News and World Report. That was a couple of weeks ago. That's 2-year-old data. Actually, I think they'll come up because that's based on advanced placement scores, also with some of Tennessee's scores. So that's a real honor to have a school on this list. Also, the Education Consumers Foundation honored Central Magnet School as the middle grades in there, which are their 6th through 8th grade, is the 3rd most effective school in the Middle Division, Tennessee. The banner on the wall that's on my right, your left, behind there is the banner that sent the Education Consumers Foundation is an independent organization that looks at value-added scores in Tennessee, so they won that. 5 Rutherford County schools were reward schools this year, which means you must be in the top 5% of the state of all the schools in Tennessee in order to qualify. Central Magnet, Homer Pittard Campus, Lascassas, McFadden, Stewart's Creek Elementary were all. We had 19 National Merit semifinalists. There's been lots of publicity for the Oakland High School launch the Megatronics Lab in December. Thank you for helping us fund that and put that in place. We're the first high school in the country, as far as we know, to offer an on-site program for high school students in Megatronics. Others are visiting and modeling. After that, we're working to expand that with some night classes. Siegel High also has Megatronics. So very much with the Chamber of Commerce and all with that. So real opportunities that we hope attracts business in Rutherford County along with people that live here. Not going to read the rest of it. As you get a chance, go down there and look at some of those bulleted items, if you will, and take a look at that. I want to point out another thing or two to kind of motivate a little bit of where we came from in developing this budget and what we looked at. One is the salary survey of top-tier positions. While we were in the budget discussions, and it's a spreadsheet that's got Rutherford, Metro, Williamson, Knox. It looks like this. Your question. Our board asked us to try to do a study. Where are we? Where do we stand? What's as far as positions and all in Rutherford County? Point out 2 or 3 things for you. Part of this, Knox had done the study this year. We took theirs. Our HR department, Ms. Paula Barnes, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, helped add some other numbers there, but it kind of lets you look in comparison. We're beginning to get behind in a lot of some of our administrative and other salaries. So You know, I'm sad to say today, one happened this afternoon after lunch. I received an email from Kevin Dyson, who was former Titan. He was assistant principal at Stewart's Creek High School. He's going back to Williamson County Schools in the same position, assistant principal, about $22,000 more, just to let you know. Wilson County has posted right now a position for their assistant superintendent for curriculum instructions, what I used to do. It's $120,000. So we've got some of our people are applying for that over there, some of our principals. So I just want to say to you that we have to keep our eye on this, that we do not find ourselves not competitive with some of these positions. But you have to respond to your constituents. So I want to point out one thing that's very important for you as people ask you questions. Now, how do we operate? The question, $980 per student, less than the state average, that sort of thing. We're very, very efficient. Don't make any apologies for that. But something that kind of shows up for this, if you look in the fourth line down, ratio of student numbers to administrators. These are state numbers that we pulled. It's not numbers that we have. In Rutherford County, for every 326.7 students, there's one administrator, the principal, assistant principal, some administration like that. Look at the other districts across there. That's another way, again, as we have gotten funds and as we place positions, we put them in the classroom. So you can see very clearly here that the numbers we have for pupil-teacher ratio and all are applied basically, again, directly for the students to serve as students. That's why we exist. But again, that's something else for you to look at. That's one of the things that was driving our board and when developing the salary schedule to what can we do to make sure we do stay competitive? What can we do to see that we do not get behind or playing a lot of catch-up? And we are behind some, so some of the things that's in the budget are addressing this study and others. Now, we tend to be fairly competitive at starting salaries for teachers. Where we tend to lose some of the competitiveness very often is in subsequent years. We're turning into a training ground. Ours mostly will go to Williamson County, some to Metro, believe it or not, things like that. So a lot of these kids get out of college with student loans, $20,000, $30,000. You know, you get several $1,000s per year. That makes a difference to those. So this is just information for you. It gives you a little bit of comparative data where we might be in that. So if you would look at the joint meeting sheet, which is the next one dated for today, just some quick facts for you as we begin to look more intently at the budget that may help you understand some of it or point out some things. In the general purpose school budget, which you're looking at tonight, it's $326,144,038. We based this on about a 2.5% student enrollment increase, which has been fairly consistent over the years. The increase then over the amended budget, should say 13-14 there, is $18,327,969, or about 5.95%. How about our enrollment this year? Overall enrollment for 14-15 was down some, 1.2%. The end of the seventh month, 41,446. We're the fifth largest school district in Tennessee now. You know, Murfreesboro and Rutherford County together is larger than Hamilton County. They run about 47,000, somewhere in that particular range. We've been closing on them very quickly. The difference is the elementary actually is down a little bit, and that's primarily due to a couple of factors, and I've said this, I think it's the Health and Ed in the past once before. Murfreesboro City opened Overall Creek, so we lost over 200 students in elementary from Blackman Elementary, and we needed to lose some, honestly. We had so many portables there, really, really over capacity. Some came from Brown's Chapel. Part of our Brown's Chapel zone comes back up into Murfreesboro near the Medical Center Parkway area and some of those apartments and things. Bounds Chapel, so some of those chose to go over All Creek. So we had a number that did go. Muffinsburg's growth this year is, I think, over 800 students in their elementary, so it was a very large growth for them. Another factor that played into that is they offered this year free meals in Muffinsburg City Schools, breakfast and lunch. And one of the reasons there, the federal government provides certain funds based on free reduced, and they're around 60% or a little better than 60% free reduced. So they chose to take that funding and give everybody free meals. We did some analysis early on, and we're at about 43%. If you can go back historically, over the last 10 years, our free reduced has gone up about 12%. We're going to a higher free reduced figure, about 1% per year. That's roughly what it is. But the break-even point for us is roughly 55%. So we would have to take money out of the GPS budget to offer free meals. That's not wise. Now, in Rutherford County Schools, anyone that earns free or reduced gets free or reduced meals. Like I say, 43% of our students get those meals. But it just was not economically viable for us. It just didn't make sense to do it blanket where everybody gets free or reduced. But for a parent, just to say what I'm trying to say, for a parent that might have 2 children in school for their breakfast and their lunch, they could save about $800 and $900 a year for 2 students in school. That's a pretty good incentive, plus you don't have to fool with the meals, they're at school for breakfast and lunch. So that paid into it. The high schools grew 2.7%. Kind of surprised at that, but it continued to grow. Some high growth schools, just to point out for you, and one of the reasons I do this is because it's some places that you're helping us address. And I really want to thank you for that. Cedar Grove Elementary was up 4.5%, Royal Walden 5.9%, and the drawings are being completed for that addition at Royal Walden. You're familiar with that. Rock Springs Middle up 4.5%. The new middle school that we're planning in Smyrna, it's off of the Rocky Fork area, that you've given us some funds to do design work, purchase property for that, would offer relief to these middle schools in that area. Stewart's Creek Elementary, that's in that complex of Stewart's Creek Elementary, Stewart's Creek Middle, Stewart's Creek High is one of our fastest growing areas. And if you look at the developments and the lots that's been approved out there, that's going to be an issue for us. So when we're looking at the Rocky Fork area, we did enough property for an elementary and a middle school there too, trying to look down the road a little bit and prepare for that. So Blackman Middle School is up 5.4%, a little over 1,200 students, and we opened this year with the annex, started a little bit later in the fall, but those students are there. Whitworth Buchanan up 13.2%, and Eagleville in that area is really growing. He has waiting lists of people Mr. Reed wanting to get into Eagleville. 3.8%, almost a 4% growth there in Eagleville. Very, very attractive to lots of people that can have their students in a K through 12 school that still does very well. In this budget, the position increases is 1.8%. So we're absorbing some. We expect to go roughly 1.8% actually is the personnel change. What are we doing for salary and benefits in this? It's a 3.1% average for teachers, classified staff. Bus owners may be a little bit less than that, but it's included in a raise for that. Our board has had the philosophy, and I firmly agree with this, that we also need to take care of our custodians, our cafeteria people, our people that are educational assistants in our building, because all of these people are part of our team. So we include them in the raises. When we give to the teachers, we do that. The governor promised a 4% increase for teachers. That was the political statement. But when we got the figures, and it was closer to 2.3% in the BEP education funding component and the classified funding component. How does that happen? It happens because they'll take the state salary schedule at one of the lowest tiers, and they'll say, we're going to increase this by 4% or something, and that's how they'll arrive at their dollars. So it's not applied across the board in those salary schedules. Did the same thing for insurance, by the way, too. The initial estimate.
Excuse me, sir. What you're saying is that we have more senior teachers, I guess, than what they used, and that's why we wound up getting less percentage-wise, because they used a lower level.
Unless they use the state minimum salary schedule. And there's not hardly any district in the state of Tennessee that will do the state minimum. When they send us a dollar, then we have to apply it to the positions that are BEP earned, and any positions in addition to BEP. And I don't know really any school districts that operate just solely on the BEP minimum numbers, because children do not come in nice little groups. I mean, you don't get 20 every time in K through 3 or pupil-teacher ratio. You know, when we operate, just an example, we may operate, a school may have 19.7 average in K through 3 or in a grade. It's not when 20 more students come in, it may be when 5 more students come in that you bump past that 20 mark. So you're going to have to add a teacher. So, and that happens across the state, but really here in Rutherford County. So very often you have to put that other teacher in when just a few students grow. Now, if we had reserve capacity, and very few buildings where we have reserve, where you could grow 20 students before you have to have another teacher or so, but most of ours are so close that it hits much more quickly, just in that pupil-teacher ratio. The initial estimate from the state is that our system would receive $4.2 million in state funds for teacher salaries, and Mr. Schaefer, this better answers it. We really got about $3.2 million. And again, if you go back and take that state minimum salary schedule and the lowest tiers in it, and you start taking percentages, that's what you get. So the combination of state and local funds, we're trying to create a 3.1% raise for our teachers here. Hamilton County is looking at 5%. Williamson County has advertised that they're going to maintain the 4%. Now, I don't know how far they are along in the budget, but again, just to let you know, this is kind of where we are in that competitive business. The fifth item I want to point out, our GPS budget's 81.7% for staff and benefits. So our board really doesn't have a lot of flexibility. We're in the people business. We're not manufacturing. It's not buying machinery or equipment other than certainly buildings. But in the operating budget, it's people. And so roughly 82% of your budget is the people that we hire and work for us, with classified and certified around 4,700 employees. That's what you're looking at. I think we're second behind Nissan, you know, actually for Rutherford County, when you stop and look at it with the 41,000 students that we have. Another thing that I'll point out to you in 6, textbooks line item 449. What we're going to ask this year, we're going to ask that we're going to roll most of our textbook monies this year. This was supposed to be the time we buy math textbooks. We're going to roll that to the 15-16 budget, or ask you to roll that, put it in the ending fund balance, pull it back out for 15-16. As you know, and if you follow the news, the state is reviewing the standards for what they should be for third grade math and fourth grade math and that sort of thing. It just made a whole lot of sense to us, and many other school districts are doing the same thing, to let's let the standards work their way in a little bit, and then when we purchase a book, and now textbook companies, with the electronic, the way they can amend the book, they can make changes relatively quickly. In print books, they can actually print them for a state now, based on your standards, much better than they used to. So what they do in a case like this, when we get the Tennessee standards, or we see kind of where they're going to be, I would like to be able to purchase for our students and our teachers and the people a textbook's very close to the standards upon which they're expected to learn. So by delaying from one year to the next year's textbooks are adopted for 7 years. You got that 6 years, 6-year cycle. And so there's a new book each year. Next year's was mostly career and technical education, which is one of our smallest adoptions. Math is one of our largest, because a few years ago, the state said that a high school student has to have math each of their 4 years. You have to have 4 high school maths, and you must take a math each of your 4 years in high school. So you really now have a kindergarten through 12th grade math for students. So that's why it's one of our largest. So we knew that it would, but if we had to roll forward for a year, since career and technical education is a little smaller and not as large, many times in career and technical education, we may not purchase a textbook for every student in the class because so much of that is skill-based. Mr. Estes is one of our board members over there that taught in career and technical education. Many times you want a set of books for the class as a reference that they use. It's not necessarily something that you would take home. So in that case, very often we'll buy textbooks for the class usage and for the teachers to use in that as they go out and then apply the skill. So textbook, that's line item 449. We look at that. Now, what's our challenges? State technology minimum requirements for online testing. The requirements for the state of Tennessee, and several of you have heard this song and dance, I think, already, but we have people on television and those that are watching us tonight. The Tennessee is going to online testing, electronic testing, instead of paper and pencil. Now, they are saying that it costs roughly $6 more per student to offer a paper pencil assessment than it does an online assessment, electronic assessment. And that's where our world is going. If you go to work at one of the major manufacturing places here in Rutherford County, it's very likely when you take your assessment to apply with them, it's going to be online. It will be online. So it really kind of makes sense. And even the training, then once you get the job and you have to be trained, it's probably going to be online. In fact, if we go to our county system now and you look at our risk management and we go in and take those tests, they're all online, that you're already doing that. So it really makes sense to prepare our students for the future, that even though the state's doing it, that the assessments are going to move online. That's the world our kids will live in. You know, that will be almost entirely. So the state, though, is saying that we need to be able to test 1/2 of our largest grade simultaneously at one time. And in order for us to do that, and it has to be a Windows 7 machine or higher or something that's equivalent. We have so many Windows XP, and in prior years, one of the things that got cut very often is we had to reduce budget was the technology piece. And we were even up until recently, very often we're buying refurbished, used machines, that sort of thing. So when they came out early last fall, August, September timeframe, they were saying your XP machines will be fine. They came along, and then September, October, when they awarded the bid, which the bid was actually bidded and then awarded around December to Measurement Inc., which is their new testing company, everything has to be Windows 7. To meet the 1/2 mark to test a half of your highest grading roll, for Rutherford County Schools is 3,721 computers. 3,721. So the other day, you approved as a full commission, we took $1,000, $1 million, excuse me, from the growth in sales tax to go ahead, and Mr. Solomon, our technology person, has already ordered $1 million worth of those computers for this summer to be delivered, because then our staff can install them, image them, make the connections for them, and won't have to, if we can do it, then we don't have to bid that out and the cost. It's much less expensive if we can do it in-house. So those have been ordered. Because we were ordering the number that we had, he was able to get them knock over $100 a machine off. So from some of the original figures we had, he said, I'm looking at possibly ordering before this summer's over $3 million worth of computers. Y'all gonna have to work with me here, and they did. So that was really good news that we were able to leverage that a little bit to do it. But Mr. Schaefer, I'm going to use your word again. That's one of those unfunded mandates, okay?
There's a lot, you can use it in plural on this, and what's happening now.
So that is one of those things that we see very often.
Ms. Rodham, I've got a question about that. As it relates to the minimum requirements for the testing, is that applicable in any way to students that might take summer school classes or any type of summer education or online learning that might be offered through their school? Or does that only need to be when school kicks off in August? Do all of these computers need to be installed, or what's the schedule for
In
how
every
quickly they need
school,
to get those in?
at every school, typically in your computer lab, you're going to have some Windows 7 units. The problems that you ran into, summer schools are much smaller. And so we'll have the capacity to handle summer.
Okay.
That'll not really be a problem for us in that. But certainly when the fall, Tennessee, I hate to go too much in this because it's like chasing rabbit. Tennessee will go to 2 assessments per year, starting next year with the 10 ready. One assessment is 60% of the way through the year, and the other one is 90% of the way. The 90% is typically now where the TCAP, which you know as, and the end-of-course EOCs are given now. That'll be mostly a multiple choice type test. The change will be there can be 2 or 3 correct answers. Children have to, it's a different style of test. The test that will be given in early February will have what's called constructive response in the testing world, Mr. Turner, and that means students will be writing paragraphs, they'll be reading, in some cases they'll be reading documents from a historical past or something. They'll write about those and then have to reference back from what they've read. Maybe it's a science, something in science, a paper written on something, and then they'll have to reference specific references back to that. Honestly, that's going to be better for students too, but it's going to be more difficult. And so we needed them in this fall so students can practice on it. The new tests are very similar to if you use Microsoft Word or one of those, they'll be able to mark through something. They'll be able to read a paper on the computer, highlight what they want to remember. They can take their answers and mark through some answers and begin to eliminate. But the kids can't see this in February for the first time. So the state is opening up, actually opened up this last week, something called MICA, which is not Microsoft Word, but it's the version that's coming really from Measurement Inc., that students and teachers begin practicing on this. But once again, I just want to say to you, this is the world our kids are going to live in. I mean, this is it, so we need to do that.
But we feel comfortable that we've given ourselves enough lead time to get all of these machines incorporated.
We certainly hope so, to
Okay.
meet that.
That's what I want to make sure was,
Meet that minimum.
we had planned it out appropriately where there wouldn't be a disruption of educational services for students that might need testing or anything like that, so.
Everybody will not be tested on the same day, Nick.
Right, but we worked that in.
There'll be a window of time.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're able to get them all in.
We think we can, as long as the network holds up, the state doesn't have any problems.
Yeah.
Then I think it can be done.
Okay, good, thank you.
That's more than you ever wanted to know, I'm sorry. B part, another thing that's a challenge for us, provide same equity raise and associated fixed costs for certified and classified employees. I just want to point this out to you, because when I up there said that roughly 81.7% is staff and benefits, this budget, in order to add the Social Security for the raises and the 1.8% new position is $594,000. State retirement's another $937,000. Medicare is $139,000, and our insurance for our employees is $2.4 million. So all of a sudden, you're well over $4 million there in fixed cost associated when you have increases in pay for your classified and certified. So that certainly shows up in this budget. If and C there, if we do actually grow 2.5%, then that would be 1,036 new students. And that's buses, that's teachers, that's textbooks, that's all of the things that go with that. And interesting, when a new student comes in, you may be adopting math, but that student's also got to have science, social studies, reading, language arts, whatever it may, their English book, in any other textbook that's being used. So very often, when that new student moves into your district and you grow, it's not buying them one book, it's the whole set of books. And we have a good person over in our textbook depository, and we count books and inventory books and exchange books and move books. But that's one of the challenges that we face. Want to go into the budget now and look at it, or do you have additional questions on this sheet?
I had some questions regarding this
Okay.
sheet, so thank you. 3 questions, and
Okay.
this is the appropriate time. What is the gross dollar amount of the raises? I know it's 3.1%.
It will vary based upon the person's base salary, what it may be.
But is there a gross amount that I can see in one of these budgets? I'm seeing.
Overall,
Yes.
what, did you break that down? I think that's in a summary that we've got here.
I didn't see it.
One-page sheet that has kind of bluish
Yes.
position numbers. On the right-hand side, our new positions are $3,033,000.
Yes.
If you subtract that $3,033,000 from the $9,796,450, so you've got basically $6.8 million in raises. About 1.16% of total payroll is step increases that are built into our salary tables, and then the 3.1% raises on top of that.
We use the monies from the state to improve the salary structure. If you're going to be competitive, back again, as our board looked at this competitiveness, we tried to do the salary structure. So one of the problems you run into is these other figures with fixed costs, Social Security, retirement, insurance, all of those tends to be much of the local part. Now, the state gives us a little bit for classified, but that's not their emphasis at all. So there's a little bit of an increase for classified in that also that will be state funds. So when he talks about the 9 million or so there, we know from the state that you got about 3.2 for the teacher part, and there's some in classified, which is hard.
500,000.
So probably 4 million of that, close to it, somewhere in that range, would be new monies coming from the state.
We're coming up with somewhere in the 3 million range from
Probably 3 to 4, somewhere in that range.
the budget. All right. This budget's based on a 2.5% increase in student enrollment. Last year, the actual was 1.2. Does the funds generated by, if we underestimate the number of students that we increase, do we have more money in the ending fund balance?
Yes, we
Is
do.
it that simple?
Yes, we do. We do. And I'll talk about that line item in just a minute, but yes, we do, and that's where if they're unused, the people here at the central office do not, when we get the teacher, just send them out. I mean, we look at the numbers, we look at how many kids are taking a Spanish course, and you look at the class size. The penalty, the state law penalty for an oversized class starts at $45,000 and goes on up to about $65,000 for every.
50, 62.5, and
75 now.
Yeah.
I stand corrected. I don't know of any school system that doesn't meet the class size. I mean, if the legislature created the penalty so severe that you can hire a teacher as cheaply as you could run up a class size. So you just got to do that.
Are the 50 teacher increase, are they related to the 2.5% growth, or?
Yes.
They're, okay. Thank you.
No.
They've got to have another teacher and stuff, and that'll evolve itself throughout the enrollment and next year. They don't go out and hire teachers, they'll be all everything you needed.
So the budget's funded to that amount.
Yeah.
It's only drawn if needed.
Yeah.
It could increase, but
But we will get more state money too. I mean, suppose we grow 2.5%. Then the state BEP funds for our student growth, that share roughly, we spend roughly $3,000 something per student, and the state federal is a little over $5,000, a little over $8,000 per pupil in education in Rutherford County. So if that new pupil comes in on our average daily membership, ADM, then what they count, then we'll get roughly that $5,000 in.
That has changed, though.
Okay, what's the?
Well,
I know how to go to school.
we had a lot of discussion about this last year. The growth fund for
Yeah, that's a different thing.
13-14 was $27 million. So your students above your prior year enrollment, if you grew really over even 0.8%, you got a hefty amount. Well, for the 14-15 budget, that pool was cut to $15 million, and you're probably only going to get it if you're something over 1%. Next year, it's been cut to $10 million.
The pie for the whole
The
state of
pie.
Tennessee is 10 million.
So it used to be, if we had, some of the years we had over 5% growth, there were years where we could pretty much plan on getting 100% of the state funding for our growth students. Those days are gone. We have to have it covered out of our local funds and our BEP estimate because we are not going to get as much growth. I'm hoping we'll get $250,000 for this year.
You know, one of the strange inequities is ADM funding basically runs a year behind. So if you grow this year, it'll be next year before you get the money. The same thing happens to you. If I move in a new house today in Rutherford County, then my property tax is due January the 1st of this next year. Now, the kid's been in school, you provided ambulance service, you provided, everything else that you provide for a person, but there's a delay between when the property tax piece kicks in. Now, they may be sales tax as they start purchasing things, but there's that delay, and so we run into that delay in schools. In years that you have fast growth, you've got to pay for it, be ready to pay for it on the front end.
Yes, on 1,036, and you came up with 50 teachers. What do you use, amount of students to come up with a teacher, 22 or?
My rough estimate over the years when I was in instruction and doing that somewhere that we found for us, somewhere about 18 to 20 students will wind up costing you a position. And it's because, again, you need 5 more students at Walter Hill to have to hire another teacher. It's also because that your pupil-teacher ratio in kindergarten through 3rd grade is 1 to 20. Mm-hmm. We have one of the larger career and technical education. We got one of the best and one of the largest in the country, really, career and technical education, and that pupil-teacher ratio is 1 to 20. So there's a hefty number of your students that have a ratio of 1 to 20. So when you calculate it all, my experience over the years, it was somewhere in that particular range. It wasn't 125 or 30. It would be that. Now, 9 of these positions, I'll go ahead and say it now, are what we think may have to be special education positions. So that really doesn't help that really doesn't do anything for the pupil-teacher ratio. The number of students that come in with needs, and I'll talk a little bit more about this, is going up. There's another little anomaly this year, which is interesting. Kindergarten is going to be a really good year. We've already had pre-registration. The state has cycled over 2 years. They went from the end of September to get into kindergarten to August 15th. This last year, they went from September 1st to August 15th to start kindergarten in Tennessee. Well, what we're getting this year is technically 54 weeks, 2 more weeks of kindergarten students. You understand what I'm saying? Because they couldn't go last year, so they had to stay overnight. You think 2 more weeks is not much, but when you're running 3,000 students per grade, think about what 2 weeks does to you. Again, it's several students. So it looks like Walter Hill told me the most they had that would pre-register early. She told me this morning about 28, 29 students. She said we pre-registered 60. I don't think that's typical everywhere. I think they did a better job of advertising it, but I can tell you there is some growth, and there's going to be higher kindergarten students this year. That's the things we look at. Mr. Schaefer, did we?
That answer.
Mr. Odom, before you leave that growth aspect, on that page where we talk about those high-growth schools, they may not be where you would think that they would be, because the perception often is that that Laverne, Smyrna area is landlocked, it's developed, it's already maximized, and yet we see this high growth in that area, and it's because of the amount of density, it's because of the amount of rental property and apartments that are happening in that area. And we see a disproportionate level of elementary and middle school attendance that come very, very quickly, almost unexpectedly. We can see that an apartment complex is being constructed, and yet when 300 units suddenly are occupied, they produce a surge of students into those elementary and middle schools, and that's where we see this growth in those areas. And so when we look at those areas, we're blessed that we had Overall Creek open with Murfreesboro City Schools, and yet we see that growth in those areas. You can equate that to the apartment and rental housing that continues to develop in our community and the impact that it has on our school system.
You could throw townhomes and that type into it
Density,
also,
yes.
because there's lots of.
They go up now with numbers where we used to go out. And the big change for Murfreesboro, they're unlikely to see that much change in subsequent years, you know, I mean, not that you won't have kind of the same numbers go, but I think our growth, the whole county-wise, it'll come back. You have that. So you had, with Browns Chapel and Blackman, it was 300 and something students actually left us last year and went over there. You're not going to see that again in another year. In sixth grade, up until this last year, we got 50% of their sixth grade students. I just tell you that. I mean, I can tell. I can look at our enrollment in the end of fifth grade. I can look at enrollment in sixth grade. And then we got their other 50%, because they go through sixth grade, at the seventh grade start. This year, it's closer to 35 or 40%. And I think part of that is, again, the meals, the free meals, and that change in that. So there's a dynamic there that is changing.
You mentioned the BEP funding, how it's basically being drained down. And the state, apparently, they're not advertising it, but they're backing out of the education business a little bit at a time. They're putting more burden on the county and less on them, where last year, 5,000 of approximately federal and state money and 3,000 of ours. That number's, and it's going to continue to do so, I would say. And they're talking about the 4%. They cook the books to make up the numbers for to some extent, but they're not talking about that they're trying to do a sneak unfunded mandate, basically, and put more and more of the burden on the local taxpayers and off the back of the state. But that is happening, is it not?
You know, they advertise pay for in insurance. The state had been paying 10 months of an insurance. Well, our teachers may not teach 12 months, but we have to pay insurance, our share on those other 2 months. And so they said they were adding a month of insurance. And I serve on the state BEP committee. Our number one recommendation from people all over the state, people like myself, were saying, you need to help us with these other 2 months. They are employees and they have to be paid. So they came back and did 1 month. But the way they calculated what 1 month cost, they went to the state insurance plan, the lowest level, and increased that by 1 month. There's very few people choose that plan. So again, it was that discrepancy, exactly what you're saying, between what sounded really good about being 1 month and what the actuality in the dollar. That's how you get from 4.2 million down to 3.2 and things like that. That's exactly what they did. If you're ready, we'll talk about, there's a summary sheet. So, and we'll go through any line item, through any of the budgets that you want to, but I think we can I can go down through this sheet and answer a number of your questions that may help a little bit. So we'll look at that. The big change in the teacher again, which you've already picked out. Again, there's 41 regular teaching positions and 9 sped, if we need all 41 of those. That's basically the breakdown we got now. If we have an issue somewhere down the line and need more sped, we come back to you as a line item change and make that change. You know, we ask you, will you help us amend it? So that's the number of positions there. Career ladder is phasing out. That comes from the 1980s, so you can see that going down each year as people retire and leave. The position, I point out 119. When you're looking at line 119, look also at lines 161 and 162. 161 and 162. From time to time in the accounting, the state accounting, the way they have us to record, we move from one line item to another. So if you'll kind of look at those, when you look at the 161, again, in the 162, you see there's 2.2 positions less in 162. Some of that is in that reallocation you see up there at 4.2. So that's part, some of that's just simply moving people around. Typically, we don't have less people, but sometimes they get recategorized the way the state wants us to report it and account for it. So there is a little growth there, but that's mostly the change.
On career ladder,
Yes, sir.
you're telling me that there were 5 people drawing the $1,000 a year that retired or left the system. Is that right? Because don't they get $1,000 a year?
I looked at, probably back in April, I looked at where I was year-to-date, dropped it down a tad. I look at that once a year now. Some years there's not much of a drop, some years there's a bigger drop. So,
If we don't, again, that would go in.
Well, you won't get it from the state. I mean, this is not local. You don't get, you either get that 711,000 or you won't, based on the number of teachers that we turn in. So
it's a full.
that's a flow-through item. You know, is what that is.
Mr. Odom, with the increase in educational assistants 9 for the year, how do you reconcile that with the number of teachers? You set a threshold of if we add 5 teachers, we add 1 EA, or is there even a formula based around that?
The EAs are basically all sped. That 8.4 is sped.
Okay.
Actually, 2 of those were previously paid by the federal, and we're having to assume now in GPS. There's several of those positions. Some of it came from early on, really from the ARA time. We hired some people in special ed that for that American Recovery Act, if you remember, special funding expired. Any positions you have there, you either got to cut them or you got to assume them. We're kind of about, will this work us out of it this year?
We'll have, I think, 4 left.
So we're pretty much about out of that, but that's what that is. But for some students, we have to have one-on-one or other factors in dealing with that. But it's basically to help with the special education program. Looking down, I guess another thing that you may want to look at, the guidance personnel. There's an increase there. Well, computer programmers, I guess I should mention that one too. That's basically, again, to help install those computers and all. It's one additional person in the technology department. That's what that is. We now do our own cabling, and we hire those at a lesser rate than some of our people that actually work more on the computers. So that was a position to try to help address that. Line item 123, again, what we have done, this isn't to try to keep your guidance counselor somewhere in line, basically with your student enrollment growth. I looked today, we once upon a time, to stay accredited, we had to have X number of guidance counselors, assistant principals, librarians, and all based upon the number of students in the school. The advanced ed has backed away from that on the accreditation. We've tried to maintain that because it's kind of a minimum. I looked today, And based upon their projections for next year, it would take 5 guidance counselors. We've got 3 here. But what we've been able to do in some instances is we put in a couple of years ago or so, started using a graduation coach. And the graduation coach concentrates. As new students are coming in, that person, we actually pay the graduation coach for an extra couple of weeks. They make a teacher's salary, pay them for an extra couple of weeks. You look at your incoming freshman and you say, based on this student's testing, what we know about this student, do they need to be in honors algebra? Do they need to be in regular algebra? Or is this a student we're going to have to get into some kind of response intervention early? It helps them track and then work with the teachers to place those students properly. So the graduation coaches also then concentrate. We have to graduate, to get counted for graduation rate, we must graduate a student in 4 years and 1 summer. That's it. Now, about 4 or 5 years ago, they gave all special education students 5 years and a summer to graduate. They gave all ESL students 5 years and 1 summer to graduate. That was really fair. That was really the thing to do. I mean, some of you may have taken 5 years to graduate college, but you wouldn't be a dropout because you did that. And so these kids that need a little bit longer time, if we can talk them into staying and getting a high school diploma and work with them, it's the best thing in the world to do. But in the federal accountability, the No Child Left Behind thing that came down, they changed it to where you must graduate in 4 years and 1 summer or you do not count for the system's graduation rate. We graduate more than our about 93% graduation, but it may not be in 4 years and 1 summer. It may take some students 5 years. They do not count for you. So we get the graduation coaches to work with those seniors and those that, what do we offer now? We have online courses for students. How many online courses do we offer this year, Mr. Vega? Can you tell me right off?
We had over 1,000 at the last count, but that was last year and this year half credit, so it was 500 full credit.
So several of you have said for us, that's not a new classroom. Our teachers teach it. Except for your free reduce, basically people pay to take that course, and they can take it online. Our teachers teach it. They have so many students they can do. So we're shifting more students to some courses online. And so that lets students that get behind also to help catch up. It's amazing how many magnet school students we have that want to take specialty courses, and they'll go to summer school and get one of the course, get a social studies out of the way, they'll get an English out of the way or something, so they can go take an engineering course, a health science course that they weren't going to have enough periods in the day to do to take. But again, that makes us a better Rutherford County and a better society doing that to meet their needs.
That costs us about 2 teaching positions, but it's produced almost 5 teaching positions.
Credits. And it also has prevented us from hiring 3 positions by being able to offer online at some of our high schools for a group of 30 or a group of 40 needing their second class there as well. So it's been a great savings.
Especially like the classroom.
Right, to Mr. Zucker, that's a perfect segue into where I was going with that. Just that, Mr. Holliday kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, and I'd be curious to know, either from Mr. Blair, anyone, you from the school board, as we keep moving in that direction with where education is really going as far as how students are learning, and, you know, our tax base starts to dry up a little bit with rental properties and apartments and things like that aren't necessarily property tax, folks buying new houses. Has the school board begin to formulate plans as it relates to online education and really accelerating our move in that direction, or where are we on that?
We've
Because
only
I
been
think
doing
that's
this 2 years, about 2 years.
okay.
So yes, I mean, you can see now with over 1,000.
Yeah.
Courses are in half credits, but it makes 1 credit, you know, for the,
Sure.
for the course. Yeah, yeah, we do, summer too.
I just didn't know if we were going to get to the point where, not, I hate to use the word force students to do that, but because of building and construction costs and things like that, where students could stay at home and just do their online. I know Mr. Jordan, when he was a commissioner, had referenced that and had mentioned that as an alternative possibility. And I trust our school board implicitly to do the right thing, but I really hope we are continuing just to keep us updated as a committee where we are and things like that, because I think that brings real value into what they're going to need in college and the workforce and things like that if we keep pushing them in that direction. And I think to a lesser extent, it encourages responsibility they might not have at the school because they have to do it at home. You have to find out, I've got to make my own schedule. I've got to get up and take this class. I've got to get up and do this exam. At school, they're there, and yes, the teachers can force them, but they're distracted by whatever else, sports events, things like that.
We
So-
bring them in to take the test.
Okay, but they still
So
can do
it's
some of
not-
the coursework
I mean,
at
if
home though,
somebody can
right?
help you at home and do it, but when it comes to the day
Right,
that you
sure.
don't have to come in to a site,
But that's different than if they can take classes at home where they might have assignments. Teacher says, look, bring this in a week and I want to see what you've done, and we can go over that in a class session. But I'm encouraged to hear we're moving that direction. I just want us to keep moving that direction as quick as we can, but efficiently as we can too.
Our ultimate goal is to mandate at least a half credit at some point for all of our high school students because it's mandated from us for our universities now. But
Okay.
at the moment, it takes plenty to develop
Sure.
all those things and do those types of things.
But that's good. I'm glad we're moving in that direction.
the other caveat is, what do you do with a kid that doesn't have internet
Sure.
access at home? Vice Mayor Davidson gets what he's trying to do, where we get internet access, and then the kid that may not have a computer at home that allows him to do that, that's your other issue
Right.
that you're running.
Well, but I said this, and I told Mr. Blair this, and I'm going to be a man of my word because we discussed this. Every child is valuable and has value in what we need to do as a school board, as a committee, as a board of education. And so if we're not looking at all those options and taking those into consideration, we're doing a huge grave disservice to every one of those children that come in, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. If we're looking at children as children, we owe them to do as much research as we can and be as proactive as we can to make sure that they've got the ultimate and successful environment for whatever each student. Some might not excel at home. We bring them into school and we have classrooms and teachers that want to help. Some might excel on the computer, and then they can come in and get help from those teachers. So I'm encouraged that we're doing that. That should be our motivator, and I think it is for everybody in the room. So I appreciate you guys doing that.
It's about the students.
Yeah, that's good. And those types of numbers need to be broadcast just as loudly as how many schools we're building and things like that. Those types of success stories is what the community, I think, is hungry for. So that's good information to provide.
Line item 124 is again another one of those accounting moves. That position's moved to line item 189. So you see it's the 1-1, it's not a change. It's again just one of those line items you have to account for. So just kind of let you know that. The medical personnel, this is our nurses. If you look out there, really you can kind of see we have 48 nurses now, one supervisor is the other. One of the things that's really changed in recent years, nurses is so important for us. We have to furnish a nurse for DISTAT, which is dealing with seizure therapy or giving that medication, tube feedings, insulin administration. Now, the legislature passed a law this year to train others for insulin administration. That training hasn't been conducted at the state level or anything yet. But I'm a little reluctant to say that I'm not sure many classroom teachers that don't have the training are excited about doing that. This is for kids that can't self-administer. We have some students on oxygen that the nurse has to be there. We have students on ventilators and trachs, and we have to have a nurse for that. Now, the catch you run into sometime, if that class that child is on a field trip, you have to send the nurse with that child, which may mean there's nobody left at the school. So while you have one or two more nurses than you do, some days a nurse may be sick and at home. So it's what in the medical world, a PRN as needed. So you have to move that person to that school. If one's gone on a field trip, somebody's not there, the kid has to be served. Our supervisor goes out and serves some days too. So it's just a matter of meeting the requirements and doing what's right for kids there. So that kind of tells you what we're dealing with there. The state funds very few of the nurses. Most of this you're doing. Are you looking that up too?
I am. One of my favorite.
It's one of his favorite types. Seemed like it was 30-something.
Oh, no.
Not that. See, I'm still
It's
shocked.
30-some that we found. They've 13 and a half.
They give us 13 and a half nurses for the 46 students. Okay. We do more in Rutherford County. That's one of the things that draws. Okay. Looking down, again, 161 secretaries. This is just reallocating some for elementary offices, the hours. This is dealing with hours, is what you're dealing with. How many hours do you give them based upon the number of students and the ones that's there? So that's mostly internal stuff. Educational assistants we mentioned earlier, all of those are 8.4. The positions there is all special education, and 2 of those are federal, so it's about a 6.4 increase. We do everything in full-time equivalent. That's why you see the decimal when you're dealing with that.
It just, for those of you new to the commission, I tried
to figure. We have 9, 10, and 12-month hourly employees. There's no good way, other than annualizing them, like they're all 12-month, to come up with what counts.
Looking down, kind of, let's see, look down, other salaries and wages, 189. That was a federal position. That's another one of those we've had to pick up with GPS. The other.
What is it? What, other salaries and wages, who are they, what are they?
This one is very quirky because we had 2 of our minimum wage employees who did fingerprinting. The company that the state contracted with ended. So we eliminated 2 minimum wage part-time employees and added a half teacher and moved a federal full-time teacher. That's why it looks like 4/10 of a position for $104,000. It's because we had 2 part-time minimum wage people who went away, and then a teacher and a half who came in. So that was just quirky. The other positions,
What type of people are they?
you name it. Boundary, our boundary enrollment person, the woman who works with our bus scheduling, routing system, our guidance coaches are in that. We have CODAs, Certified Occupational Therapy Assistants, who are in that line item. It's
a catch-all.
It's a catch-all. That's what's another. Yeah. But that line of Dakotas is probably the biggest line. It's usually 1 or 2 people in a major function.
I'd like to take 2 more line items. One of them, I think, 138, computer personnel, that's the ones that go around the technology people in the schools that.
Your wife would know them as STS, as School Technology Specialist. The reason we ask for that, because we're going to so much online teaching and online testing. These are the people that go into the school, into the individual schools, and help make sure the machine is running. They do teach some classes technology. They help teachers get materials to use the technology. We actually, several years ago when we had to cut back, Mr. Gill, we had less than what we used to have. We cut back. That was one of the things that we lost. But we're moving so much to technology, we felt we really need that person in there to help them in the school do that. Your high schools typically have 1 STS. I mean, you're running close to 2,000 students and 150 teachers there. The other ones are elementary and middle schools basically share STSs. They work in more than one place.
One more. 164, what is an attendant?
Bus attendants. Special ed bus attendants, they ride the bus. And they're really hard to keep. I mean, not many people want to come in, work an hour or 2 in the morning, then do it all day long, then come back for an hour or 2 in the afternoon. We really have trouble keeping attendants. In a few instances, what we've been able to do is use them for an attendant, and then you take them and when they get to their school, work as a special ed attendant during the day as an EA, and do that. That way you can kind of get quality and keep people a little better. So in cases where we've been able to do that, we've done that.
The other salaries and wages, I need some education on that. It's $4 million. And I see they're itemized in regular education, there's a line item, and in other categories. That's such a significant number.
Okay, I can,
Give him the page reference.
okay. On page 1 of 31, 1.2 million, our ROTC instructors. It's the thicker package with a black clip on
Yeah,
it. Page 1 of 31.
Yes.
ROTC instructors, 17 of them. In special ed, page 3 of 31, full-time equivalent, 5.1 sign language interpreters for our deaf education students. Don't have any in vocational anymore. Page 5 of 31, we have a part-time clerical person in our adult education program there. Page 6 of 31, attendance department, our zoning person. Page 7 of 31, health services, our CODAs, our certified occupational therapy assistants. In the next page, 8 of 31, other student support, our graduation coaches. And page 9 of 31, we've got 14.7. That is some of our specialists and our staff who work at the Materials Center where we have all of our textbooks maintained. Courier, all of that. Page 11 of 31, and it's just a mishmash. 72-215, the Alternative Instruction Program. Daniel McKee and Smyrna West, they're custodians and the school secretary, and they're graduation coaches. Custodians and graduation coaches, one of each.
And when you as a board are looking at this line item, is it as generic as this, or do y'all look at it?
Page by page.
Are those multitude of positions thrown into the mishmash when the board is creating the budget? It just seems like a lot of mishmash without itemization. Do y'all see it more itemized when you're developing the budget?
Yes, mm-hmm, yeah. Mm-hmm. Do you want me to continue?
I think the point is made.
Okay, I mean, it is a mishmash,
Mm-hmm.
but that's why. I had a boss who hated the other category. Because we have to follow the state chart of accounts as the Department of Education tells us to follow them. There are accounts out there that the State Department of Ed does not approve for school systems to use. We cannot use them. We have to use the ones they want us to for comparable reporting.
Thanks for the time.
I could say that a different way.
Yeah.
So the things that are a little unique about Rutherford County schools might fall into a state category that are other salaries and wages, because Mr. Sandvig does not have a category that exists across the entire state. So these accounting categories that he's using are the state-approved accounting categories, and he plugs them in where they belong, and everything lines up most of the time. But then there are those things that are unique to Rutherford County, or unique to our system, or unique to our accounting system, and they say, well, that has to fall into this other category because that's all the state offers for slots for these dollars to go into.
And there are accounts, and the state chart of accounts is like that thick, but the Department of Ed, and this is covered in the Private Act, we are to use them as prescribed for us by the State Department of Ed. That way, when they're rolling everything up, they will have comparable reporting across the state.
You've asked some very good questions. We've been over the summary sheet,
Mainly the first page of that summary sheet, but we're welcome to any of the other 31 pages or anything we looked at, we try our best.
This is a highly educated committee, Mr.
I don't want you to be like the Affordable Care Act and figure the chance to look at it. Mr. Oldham, I'm not going to say that remark right there for myself. Now, I'm not going to. Because I know for the last few days, you have given us some of this, and I've gone through this, so looking at that in particular, I come from, I guess you would call private industry, and every time I went into a budget meeting, I dealt with printing and all this sort of thing, and every time I went in to give my budget, the CAO would always say, "What are you going to give me back?" And when I looked at this, I kept saying, is there anything you can give us back when we're working on this? And I think you've worked at that, and some of this you've answered our questions. So I have to go from there. And I've heard this evening's first I've heard about the internet process. That's something, and you mentioned Mr. Davison out here and what we're working on there. That's a long way to work. I know in my district out there, that's an area wide open as a new frontier as far as the internet's concerned, because it's not there. There's areas out there, it's just not out there for people to have internet. You have little hotspots. I know this summer, last summer, when I was out there going door to door at different times, and students doing their lessons, trying to do internet, and I saw one that's actually melting to the point that they worked on it so long that they had to unplug it at different times because it would melt for them to keep trying to get internet. It just wouldn't download what all they needed to do homework and things. So that's something for the future that we in Rutherford County have to work at, trying to get internet throughout this county. I'm glad to hear, though, that we have that for the future for us. So, as far as saying that highly educated to understand everything that's in here, we would be highly confused. I don't know which, but I appreciate the time this evening that we've had. Approximately 2 years ago, the state, the governor proposed about $50 million across the state for technology improvement. And Rutherford County was $2.1 million. And what we did with that was we went into the schools and did with bandwidth, the wireless nodes in our schools. We put those in. So we spent that money trying to get set up for the future, to do more wireless, to be able to have what they call a pipeline or the internet capacity. We're going up to 10 gigs this next year. Try to do that with testing as much online testing. So we're trying to stay ahead of that. We asked the governor again, actually, we met within the last month with the Commissioner of Education. She's preparing her 16-17 budget, which she'll give to the governor in probably September or October, and then he'll get ready to let her know. And so one of the things that superintendents all over the state were asking for, you need to go back and put more money in technology. But one time, we really didn't do it for her. So she listened to us. Whether the legislature would be receptive to it, but it would really help us if they would.
Very much so. I know you mentioned Eagleville and how it's grown right there, but when you have a town like that City Hall has the opportunity to be on high-speed internet, but the library right there in town doesn't, just due to the fact that it's more than, 1,500 feet from that tower, they can't receive it. I mean, you're just a few feet from it. You're a few feet from the future, but you are that far away, and it can't be done. We're in a county I like to call progressive town. Say that's where we're headed and what we're trying to do. But yet we have areas in this county that if you had to compare it to days in the past, we're still trying to get to the frontier. And it's important that we continue to work this way with the schools that we have and what we're trying to do. Because I walked there in Eagle School the other day, I think I told you all this, where you had a class there that they were taking the test on their smartphones. And I know you have to be smart to operate a smartphone to begin with, but the students that didn't have a smartphone, they had computers for them to take their tests there. So majority of them have smartphones that they're taking their test. That blows me away, that they can do that now, and what they have the capabilities of doing.
What a teacher does, I've seen with iPads and things of that too, the teacher can throw a question up on the screen or something for them. And when they receive it out, as we call it, when it comes to the teacher, it's got every student in the classroom listed. And if it's multiple choice, that's given as an A, B, or C. Immediately, that teacher knows what was the most common answer students gave, what kids got correct, what did not, so you can adjust your teaching on the go. That's so much better. We have now, as an exit ticket, we have, there's a camera sitting at the door of any classroom, and kids can take an online test, and as they walk out the door, they literally this fast pass it under that camera, walk on out the door. When the kids finish, that teacher go back, pause it up, and see how the kids did on the lesson that day. And who needs remediation, who needs help? Do I need to reteach the whole lesson or what? It's just amazing how technology has advanced to be able to target the needs of students.
And what concerns me is that we can spend this $1 million on these 3,000 computers we need right here, and all of a sudden the state in 2 years decides, hey, we're going to have all the kids on the smartphones taking their test, and then we're sitting here with all the computers. So, you know, you never know the way technology changes.
Well, what the state will do.
Unfunded mandate right there.
We've already spent the million, we've got to spend 2 more.
Yeah.
Is there any limit on these online classes as far as the student-teacher ratios? I know, for somebody could sign up, when you get into testing, I don't know, what else, I see somebody nodding their head over there, you maybe can answer that for me.
Yes, sir, there are limits. We have a minimum limit as far as because we have a base pay for those teachers of $200, and we pay $150 per student for each half credit afterwards. They are our teachers. They do that outside of our their teaching hours. We develop our own curriculum using our own textbooks because most of the companies that we looked at when we were developing this a couple of years ago had a minimum of $600 per half credit if we used their curriculum. So we're turning around and doing a half credit for probably somewhere around $175, $160 per half credit.
Okay, that answers part of it, but what I really want to know is how many actual students could one online class have as far as the student-teacher ratio? Is it unlimited?
No, sir, it's not. No, we try to hold that to 12 or less for that one particular classroom.
The teacher contacts those students personally. We'd be glad to do a presentation, but I'd like to see it sometime. So they do, some of it's by telephone, some of it's through the internet, talking back and forth with the students, so they pick certain times they work directly with that student.
What?
The online classes are actually more difficult than an in-person class as far as getting the work done, getting the assessments, just like Mr. Adams said. When we assess for like a final test for those classes, they have to physically come in and take the assessment themselves.
I remember reading where Harvard was offering online classes, and they opened it up worldwide, so they had people from India, China, Europe, United States, wherever was coming online. And I'm thinking, well, I guess it could be unlimited, but then our resources.
We're not doing that right now.
Right, I understand that, but I'm just saying, it kept coming up, and I had to ask the question, so.
This is in its infant stages still, even with our second full year of offering these classes. You have to have pretty tight control of those as you develop that, because you're looking at developing curriculum and also getting the right teachers in the classes as well. Our guidance counselors are also involved as well, because the students who take an online class would have to have a signature from a guidance class saying that they feel that that student could successfully complete that, because once again, they are more difficult than the in-person classes.
Thank you.
Let me ask what I was telling you about the smartphone deal. I was being told a lot of this by a principal there at Eagle. He tells me this, but he's also telling me there's this day that they have there where they allow the iPads and things, or they didn't bring those. Is that a plan here in the school?
So we have to bring your own device. For the high school, just heads some of those. So, yes, we do. And a lot of kids do have the lives now to do that. So, yes, we do it through basically middle through high right now, kind of piloting that.
Grades 6 through 12 is what we officially support.
I've got a question. Mr. Odom, the school's budget has gone up 18 million, or the proposed budget's gone up 18 million over what it was last year. And I'm just trying to get a breakdown of where this might be coming from. 3 million of it is in new positions. We get that from our summary page. I'm going to say 6.8 million of it is from raises. So if you add 6.8 million to 3 million, you get about 9.8 million in either new positions or raises, and that's what your summary page says. So of the 18 million, that leaves about 8.2 million that's due to other things. Now typically about 80%, your sheet says 81% of the budget is due to personnel and salaries.
Right.
But I'm gonna, my breakdown suggests that 8.2 million of the 18 million is in things other than salaries. Now 2 million of that, I guess 2 million of this remaining 8.2 million is to get new computers for the state's testing. And I guess my question is, can you tell us anything else about the remaining $6.2 million increase? What it's going for, or any details on what it is?
What we may want to do is look at the big document, because you've got to break down by category. And go, probably as you begin to look at page 2 of 4-page summary. Yeah, let's look at that. That helps you a little bit better, probably. You can kind of see after 299, part of that is there. That's the one of the things that I read to you in the summary. Roughly 4 million is again of that 8 additional you're talking about, the type of those things above it: retirement, Social Security, unemployment, Medicare, that sort of thing. You can kind of look, if you look at page 3 of 4 on the summary again, you see above that natural gas, electricity, water, sewer, anything that's associated with that, that increased about 2,312,000 there. So one of the best ways is probably take a look at some of those category summaries there. Probably the easiest way to come up with your total.
I have some notes that I made on my copy for some of the
You want, let Jeff talk to you about some of those. We'll do that. He's got notes if we want to do that.
Back to page 2 of 4. Looking at some of the bigger increases. About a third of the way down, item 307, communication. That is going from a 1 gig to a 10 gig internet connection through the state. Astounded that actually going to a 2.5 gig was 60-some thousand. And if it went to about 91,000, it took us to a 10 gig. With the online testing next year, we feel we desperately need that. We do have a small drop, 2 items down, contracts with other agencies. Right now, we did not need our 5th or our 6th Genesis bus. That comes and goes by year. Two lines below that, 315 contracts with vehicle owners, 413,300. We have 6 buses and a 2.6% increase built in for the bus owner operators. Line 320, dues and membership, 12,500 SACS dues went up on us. We do have a slight drop in evaluation and testing, but we make up for it elsewhere. Legal services, line 331, we're up 62.2. Right now, I will be amending $200,000 to $250,000 into that line item in the current budget. We have had several expensive special ed cases this year, and one of them is still kind of being wound up, so I don't know how much I'll be amending in. The next two line items, I've increased the maintenance budget in here. So 335, 336, 50,000 and 45,000. Travel we cut 49,000. Our subs, items 369 and 370, we will have a full year of the higher rates since the Affordable Care Act came into place. And in order to provide more consistent long-term subs, the board voted to go up to $120 a day after 20 days for a certified sub. We were having some complaints about having enough continuity. So those two pieces increased the sub budget to $170,000. 399 other contracted services is going up $446,973. 200,000 of that is for special ed, Rutherford Academy, and Genesis services. 114,000 is for Read 180, which we feel we need to add in some Smyrna Laverne schools, the remediation program. And I believe the rest of that is technology related to that I ran out of time. Next line from the bottom, data processing supplies, 76,500. I have moved money around to the tech plan. It's kind of where does an expenditure best fit? Does it cross over to equipment? Is it small equipment? Is it data processing equipment proper? Depending on what is ordered, there are a couple of places I can put it. I try to be fairly consistent on that. Over on page 3 to 4, electricity, I increased that $500,000. I decreased natural gas pipelines down by $200,000, but put it back in water. Textbooks, about a third of the way down, item 449. 68,000 is vocational textbooks. Water and sewer is up 201,914. Other materials and supplies, 139,000 of that is changes within the technology plan, and 69,000 of that is for the maintenance budget. Trustees Commission, about a halfway point, item 510, increased because of higher local revenues. In-service and staff development, item 524, $129,320. That is the training we will have for the Read 180 for the Smyrna Laverne schools. And criminal investigation of applicants, fingerprinting, when we still have to do it, but when we hosted the service and provided the employees, we didn't have to pay as much. We paid the cost of the employees, but we didn't have to pay as much for the service. We lost that. So those are the other expenditures, $2.3 million. And then in the
Jeff, while you're on that page here, on 449 textbook, just a quick question.
Yes.
Do we have any classrooms in this county where the teachers and the students do not have enough textbooks for the students to take their own textbook home?
Some of the vocational classes, we just have classroom sets for other.
It's just a handful of CTE classes where they only need those manuals in their classrooms when they're making practical application. But other than that, we have textbooks for all other students.
We have to certify with the state, every fall.
Yeah.
We get, are you providing textbooks? Now, they don't furnish you all the money, but we have to sign the thing, the board has to do it. We are providing textbooks.
Well, the reason I asked first year I became commissioner was actually doing a Southern accreditation by invitation, and found out that one of the schools in my district didn't have enough textbooks to take home, and we just transferred $50,000 out of the textbook line item the day before that I hadn't set in on this. And to tell you the truth, my boiling point just blew over. And, but since then, I haven't heard of that. I just wanted to double check.
That's all we do.
Yeah.
Do you look in the future at the textbooks will all be on computer?
Let me tell you what's kind of happens there. Yes, I do.
In the near future, I think.
Well, let me put it this way. Right now, through that $14.95 a year for a textbook. well, it was it, maybe higher than $14.95, 6-year adoption, you're looking at about $90. Many of your elementary textbooks over 6 years won't be more than 90, somewhere in there. Now, here's your problem. What do? Are you gonna furnish every kid with a Google Chromebook, or what are you gonna do for them to use? How are they gonna take it home, maybe if it's an internet access? What the technology people have done is they have controlled this and kind of got together. And the doggone cost of the online is about as expensive as if you buy the book. Interestingly enough, you look on our main website, if we buy the book, they give us free online access. So if a kid gets home at night and says, I forgot my textbook at school, tough luck, we go online. We give them a password to do it. But if you buy the online access, it's the same price as if you buy the book. They control this right now. But it's got to go that way. It's sooner or later it's got to go.
Can you give me a little more in-depth explanation on item 524? Is that RTI? Because you mentioned
That is Read 180. If you buy their program, you have to use their trainers.
Read 180 is basically a software program to teach mostly middle and high. Mostly, I mean, you can use it a little bit, but we use it mostly for high school kids. They get to high school. We have a lot of mobility in this country. You go there as much, not all of them we brought to our middle school. So they get to us and they can't read. Folks, the new assessments, if they can't read, they're not going to have a chance because so much of it is reading and writing. And this program is very successful. You can look at the stats and the things that have come across the country. So they're very expensive to get in. You get a teacher, get a training, put it in, and they work through those students that just can't read and have success with it. So it costs a lot. What does it cost for a kid that can't read? I mean, you have to look at it two ways. But that's exactly what we're talking about. Scholastic to read 180. To read from kids that are extremely difficult and be able to.
You have to,
It's a one-time expense.
you have to pay the company also for their program? As
You do
well as
one-
pay their teachers?
We basically do one time that you do, you kind of got the program. Now, you may pay, some of them have an annual fee that's much less than an upgrade, so it's the upgrade for you. I mean, it's expensive, but if you, I mean, in terms of how many teachers, very quickly in teachers, you can get a certain amount of money. You understand what I'm saying? The positions and things of that nature.
Charlie, thank you. Did you get some answers there? I'm just curious.
Yes, and just to finish up, I'm just looking at the big numbers. Line 722 is the one with the 2 million in new computers. That's the assessment for this section.
That was, we took $1 million off of it, 3.1, we rolled it, and it's really 3.1.
Mr. Odom, pardon me if I'm interjecting inappropriately, but sometimes as an elected official, when we're trying to explain this to constituents, it helps to have a real application. And one of the things that Principal Dirk Ash did at Laverne High School, and Mr. Odom shared this with me, when we have need for reading interventionists, Principal Ash went out and found an individual that came from elementary school, as opposed to a lot of experience from high school. This person came from elementary school because he recognized that teaching someone how to read is really an elementary school concept as opposed to a high school concept. With a high school mentality, you might lose patience. You might say, come on, you got to get this. But he got somebody that really had the tools to be able to get the job done and was incredibly successful with that. And I point that out just to say that's the kind of innovation, thinking outside the box, getting the job done that's happening in Rutherford County. When we talk about technology and how we're using technology, we talk about virtual classrooms and everything, our central office is keenly aware of the failures that have happened in virtual classrooms and where we don't want to go, because the state legislature has shut down the K-12 program where there are unmonitored technology classrooms and opportunities of that kind of nature. What we have to do is we have to very strategically and carefully measure, prove, and validate what's effective, and that's what we're doing in Rutherford County. So when we use technology, we use it in that measured way and prove every step of the way that it is valuable to our constituents. It's effective in our classrooms, and it pays back, to the educational environment.
Along those lines, a quick question. We're spending this extra $2 million to get these computers for the testing that's a mandate. And I know you mentioned this earlier as far as personnel. Of course, my wife's a teacher, my oldest daughter's a teacher and an interventionist, and it's a nightmare when these systems go down and you don't have enough people to go out to do it. And as soon as you said this online testing, I had cold chills run up my spine thinking, oh my God, these systems are going to crash because you got so many people on them. And then how many people you're going to have to be able to help us get out of this hole when that happens? And maybe you can elaborate a little on that.
When the state does testing, that one of the designs, and this was wise, when a student sits down to take a test, say one of the TCAP, which is 10 ready, it's what we call TCAP, 10 ready test, it downloads to their computer. And then they sit there and take their test. Now, Jeff may have downloaded, but I better not look on his, because his question 7 is not mine, or maybe a totally different version when they're doing it. So they each get theirs. But the way they save it, it downloads to the computer, and so when the student finishes the test, it loads back up to our server, and then the server is uploads at night to the testing company. So you'll not have half of your students online trying to get an active connection at that time. They'll get the connection, downloads rather quickly, and then they work on that computer to take the test and upload it at night. So that's kind of the state's answer, which is pretty good to do that, I think.
That
may work.
Gives me a little more faith in it might happen. But as far as personnel, have you added any personnel specifically for technology there?
The STS is that one over there, about those 4 positions on that summary page, our school technology specialist, and then the one we had to do help with the installation.
One cabler.
One cabler.
And one of Steve Solomon's techs.
One cabler, and then one person that goes out and works on the machines too. There's actually 2 positions from this office to do that, and the others are in the other 4 are in the school.
It may be worth mentioning, you and I spoke about this earlier today, that the $2 million that we're spending on this is not part of the maintenance of effort. It's a one-time expense, so it's not one that will have to recur annually as many of the items that go into the budget do. So you want to touch on that.
The $1 million is not going to buy the 3,000 and something computers. So, I mean, it was to get us started, to get it in there where he could do it and try to start. He said that, and we paid his order, they said from 7 to 11 days we'll start delivering. So they may be this week or something start coming in, so we'll work on those. So the other $2 million be come July 1, if this is approved, we'll put out another order to pick up the others to try to do that. But it just allowed us, because you were gracious enough to do it, to begin to stagger that workload and use more of our staff rather than bid it out for somebody else to install. So, but it's going to take the 3 right at it. There's some furniture in it in cases too, some 300,000.
It's for furniture.
So it's a little bit in cases where you have to do it, but the majority of it is just the machine.
Mayor, I know you've probably had a chance to look at this. Do you have anything you want to add or any recommendations you want to make?
Difficult to budget. So commend them for their ability to respond properly and carefully.
Lisa, do you have any words of wisdom for us? Comment? So the magic question's coming, is what is this going to do to our tax rate? So, you have any thoughts yet on that? Are we still too far away?
I'd like to comment that I've been on budget for 13 years now. We're not playing games anymore. Used to be we got tiers 1 through 7 and pick which one you like, and this one had that, and that one had that, and stuff, and there were a lot of games being played more or less. Maybe mistrust between the school board and the commission. You know, the last several years, that's all I've been behind us. We've gotten good budgets. Here's a budget, pretty much a continuation budget every year with a lot of explanation. And I can remember the year with 7 or 8 budgets and probably was to pick the one you want to fund. You know, we usually went somewhere in the middle, but that was ridiculous, really, in my opinion. And I'm glad we are where we are. There's not a lot of fatness. There's not really any fatness, but, you know, we've got kids coming in, we've got educators. Any civilization doesn't educate your children, put a great emphasis on it, doesn't succeed. For Progressive County, we need to quote some of Dr. Bullen, who just came in, welcome Dr. Bullen, saying, we've got to concentrate on education, make it a better place to live. That's not him per se, but that's someone.
I personally think that we're gonna have to do some catch up and try to be better stewards in catching up with what other counties are paying and keeping our people here, because for our grade levels to come up for our scores, we're gonna have to keep our good teachers and good principals here. And we may have to just bite the bullet and do what we have to do.
There will be a shortage of teachers because they're coming up. Ms. Barr at the FSU the other day with several other school systems there. There were 2 people in mathematics certification at it. 12 years, 13 years of math. It's only many teachers, but there's going to be a shortage. If the arts and chemistry, math, foreign language, special education, we're already seeing more shortage. It's going to get more severe as the economy's improved in other areas. People have more options. Those mathematicians become actuaries for the insurance company. Now, as it grows and expands, that's what's happening.
Seems about a month ago, you mentioned to me there was a job fair that you all hosted. You normally had a very large turnout for it. Talk to us about those numbers just briefly.
You know, we would say, even back in the first year, I can remember 500 and 600 people that finally came. Did you get a count for this entirely?
This year, probably 250 to 300.
That were actually, that's drastically different from what it was. And the MTSU tells me the number of student teachers is down dramatically. But again, is other people have other options out there in the economy improves in other areas. The salary sometimes is more attractive in other areas.
I think that's very telling, just the amount of applicants is very telling. I think we've got several sections to go through. This was just the general purpose school budget. So if there's no more questions or discussion on that particular section.
Chairman, would just like to say one thing. I have to agree some with Commissioner Jordan in that it doesn't look to me, I've seen a lot of these budgets too, and it doesn't look to me like they fluffed it a lot. You know, if we want to cut this budget, I think a lot of it has to come from extracurricular activities, which I don't think anybody wants to see that. But I just did a quick, I'm surprised Charlie Baum didn't do it, but I just put a 50-cent property tax increase on a $170,000 house, which is maybe a little bit below the average of the median price of a house in a single-family residence in this county, is $212 a year, just to throw it out to let people think about it.
Okay, Health and Ed Committee members, anybody want to make a motion for me?
I make a motion we approve the budget that we got before us.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we're going to do a roll call vote.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Wilcher?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes.
We'll look at the capital projects.
Yep.
Just as a, by where to start this one, you have roughly 7 million square feet on the roof. County school buildings, like literally buildings in Rutherford County schools. If there's a 7 cent, we kind of based on how we would spend it. Mr. Clardy's here to help us. So you can kind of look at proposed budget for what we did in 14-15, 15-16. On subsequent pages, you have what's projected for 16-17, 17-18, and out in subsequent years. But again, this is something you look at very often, but Mr. Clardy's here if you'd like to see some of the priorities and that sort of thing. What we're running into now is the chillers and the things like that for some of those that have been in place for many years, or we're having to do the replacements for those. So that's mounting up. We're got most of the sewer things and all. You're down to how many? One? Buchanan? Buchanan's the only one left where we have that other issue with that. So we did attach to Eagle Sewer this time for that school.
Why is our nickel bouncing through sort of, the certified rate 4.4? The nickel we approved, what is it down to now?
I think that's right.
Dr. Fuller, nickel, we gotta wait for it. The nickel now 4.4 or something like that, adoption certified rates over the years.
437.
4.3.
Any questions on capital projects? Mr. Clardy, anything you want to share? You want to point out?
Well, we've done a lot of building in the last year, so at some point, the new building turned into old building. And you can't keep the same amount of funding that you're keeping now, but the square footage and the number of buildings are going up. The longer you delay it, the more out of balance things get. So if we don't do something now and start addressing this increase in the issues, then we're going to end up with a bunch of schools sitting around that's going to need millions and millions of dollars worth of work done on it. So we've been very successful in managing what we get to, because everyone's committed to doing the projects that need to be done, and we have prioritized them every year and attacked them on the basis with a nickel that is now 4.37%. And we've done a good job, and everybody's been on board with it. But we're going to have a very critical situations come up if we don't start increasing that budget.
If I may, when I first came here, as Dr. Bullen remembers, we were using borrowed money for repairs like this. When we would build a school, whatever we had left over, we would move it to these repairs. And it has really worked well when we are using current revenue, even though, yes, some of these should last 10, 15, maybe 20 years. But it's nice that we are not using borrowed money as current expenditures.
We can look back at Oakland and Riverdale, which, we spent $8 or $9 million a piece 6 or 7 years ago, I'm guessing. It's something we have let those schools go. We don't want to repeat that because they were good schools at one time, and we just kind of forgot about them. And if we go back to those same habits, we can have a total disaster on our hands in 7 or 8 years.
I'd just like to add to that also that we've concentrated on quality control on our newer buildings now. And we're
we're getting better roofs, we're getting better structural components, we're getting better aesthetics, we're just doing a much better job all the way around of making sure that we're getting what we're paying for. And that actually increases the life of those buildings, particularly in the roofing area. I remember, as you said, Oakland and Riverdale, when we had big rainstorm back then, we'd end up with 30 garbage cans sitting around on the inside of the building. And we attacked those issues with the help of the board and commission, and we have those under control now. And 10 years ago, we would get 50 rain calls every time it rained with roof leak. Now we may get 3, and they're usually specialized issues, not just something that has failed out in the middle of the field roof, but maybe a piece of flashing where the water's soaking into the block and maybe something else and gets it out. Or a roof drain that stopped up, something like that. So we've made a lot of progress, and we need to continue to stay on that path to take care of this stuff.
Any questions for?
I'd like to add this for the record that Mr. Cardy and the maintenance department here have done an excellent job in maintaining the buildings, the schools that we have, because you can walk into them and you cannot tell that they're 40, 50 years plus years old. Some of them look like they were just built 5 years ago or way last year. So I just personally want to commend them for the job they're doing.
I want to commend the school board as well as Mr. Cardy, since Mr. Cardy has been on it, and you all have helped us. It was sad to walk into Byrne High School and see the roof leaking, and they had garbage bags, and over the computers, they had garbage cans sitting out with water in where they have caught it. I haven't seen any of that. I haven't heard of any of that, and I'm commending all of you.
I'd just like to say that we need to give credit where credit is due. We have a fantastic group of qualified people working in our maintenance department. We have a fantastic group of inspectors and consultants that work for us on existing buildings and new construction. We have a fantastic, under my department, a fantastic group of computer people who do our own cabling and save a bunch of money. So Steve Solomon is in charge of that. We have Ken Curley, who is in charge of the maintenance. And then, of course, I have 3 outstanding project managers, Trey Lee, Brian Yarbrough, and Jackie Holden. So I just want to give them credit. They're a great bunch of guys. They're very professional. They earn their money every day, and I think we all do. So that's probably the reason we're here. And we just appreciate your praise, and we also appreciate you funding us correctly.
Well, and along those lines, I have to give you, I think I've given you public praise for this before, but I know it may have been last year or the year before, Thurman Francis had a significant roof failure with a lot of damage to the library, the cafeteria, incredible inconvenience to that school. And all I heard from the administration was praise for your team and how much they said we could not have asked for them to respond any better or do any more. We don't know how there was a maintenance person anywhere else in the county because they were all here. So
thank you.
Handled very well.
We're getting down to the last of the old coal pitch tar roof, and those extreme temperatures during that winter froze those roofs, and they contracted, drew them up, and they drew cracks in them, and then when it started falling out, the water started running in. So we replaced that this year with the help of the commission and the school board and the funding that you have given us. We are attacking the other buildings that are like that for the funding, so we appreciate y'all so much.
Okay, if there's no more discussion or questions, we're ready to entertain a motion on the capital projects budget.
Madam Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the capital projects budget next year.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Need roll call first?
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Aye. Next.
Next is cafeteria, for those of you that kind of might be new, this is not any GPS budget funds go into this. This is a federal lunch program fund plus for the students and adults that pay at the schools, their funding would be included in this. So this is our kind of best estimate right now for that budget. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, you know, they sometimes change the amount of reimbursement or the certain foods. This is one that tends to get amended during the year based upon what's happening in Washington, but it's not a GPS general purpose school issue. It's federal monies, and any monies that you make from that you can't put anywhere else. So if you hit any overages, it still has to be spent back in the food service. They pay for the repairs of their equipment. When you put a new school up, we do put the equipment in, but the repairs, come out of this funding and that sort of thing. The workers, all of that comes out of it. Yes, they do. You have to spend it on food service.
And their fund balance, your goal is to be as close to 3 months operating expenditures as possible. You're not to be over it, you're not to be under it.
And a few years back, did you not put like the stove hood replacement, and stuff like that in this budget that we used to pay for out of
we used to pay for
the
it.
maintenance budget?
Yes.
For GPS budget, so that's money that's getting paid for, that's not on the taxpayers' back.
And way back, we paid the retirement of the medical insurance cafeteria staff. Yes, budget. Made it stand alone.
Everybody had an opportunity to review this? Any questions or discussion? Need a motion first. I need a motion, okay. So,
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
yes. System?
These are amendments, which you typically do in a month. This is not the budget for next year, the typical amendments that you would do. To address that, it's the Rutherford County Schools building program amendments, Smyrna Primary, finishing the Smyrna Primary project, and the Blackman Middle project. So we'd like to do some amendments there. If you kind of look at the bottom of the page, this building program amendment finishes up the Blackman Middle Annex, the Smyrna Primary Edition, and moves the remaining funds to our future Rocky Fork Middle and Projects Elementary Schools. Part of this is shared funding, so you got to use it back. You use it back in the area where we've already shared with the city, any surpluses that you have. The cleanup portion for each project reallocates already budgeted funds for that project to the appropriate budget line items. No new funds involved. The motion we have written for you is to amend the budgeted line items in Blackman Middle School Annex budget by a total of $1,465,670. To amend the budgeted line items in Smyrna Primary School budget by a total of $358,140. To amend the $14,877 remaining in the Blackman Middle School Annex budget to furniture for the next middle school, and to amend the $41,269 remaining in the Smyrna Primary budget to furniture for the next elementary school as presented. And again, this is Mr. Clardy and the team not spending all of the budgeted amount altogether. So we have this over, we're putting it back into next building.
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Cook?
Yes.
Commissioner Dodd?
Yes.
Commissioner Jordan?
Yes.
Commissioner Nipper?
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Turner?
Yes.
Commissioner Allen?
Yes. Is there any other business?
One comment. Have we found any money for the bleachers for Smyrna? I'm not gonna let you forget it.
There's several people who won't
Do you want that?
I was guilty of taking it out, and I was just looking for it.
Mr. Holly?
I wanted to point out the wisdom that we have in the capital funds budgeting of the Dr. Bullen's nickel that the committee tonight has seen fit to increase and to fund so well. The school board has seen a similarity, and we just want to make you aware of this. I want to make you aware of this. I won't speak for my other school board members, but I want to make you aware of this. There's a similarity between the capital expenditures on facilities. A depreciating asset that, if not maintained, comes into disrepair and becomes a problem. And technology investment. A depreciating asset that becomes out of date and unusable. And it may be that there's wisdom in a similar kind of dedicated commitment to an ongoing technology investment that we feel like as a school board, as a central office, as a school system, we have shown good stewardship of allocating appropriately and maintaining a in-step commitment with what's going on in technology and constantly being current, as opposed to kind of a swing back and forth of, we're up to speed, we're behind, we're up to speed, we're behind. And so as the commission continues to ponder these things going forward in years to come, we may find that there's an appropriate measure for a technology investment because of its similarity to the depreciating asset of capital investment.
Anyone else?
Just like to say that we understand that you are a funding body, but we also understand that you're our partners in education, and we certainly had to defend what we brought to you tonight, but we appreciate the collaborative opportunity to share our thoughts and you with us. So we appreciate the relationship that the commission and the school board has also.
I want to reciprocate that because you all are very transparent, which I appreciate and the taxpayers appreciate it. It increases our confidence level with you when you put something in front of us. So you're very thorough and I appreciate it so much. Make our job a little easier. I won't say easy, but a little easier. Okay, I've got our next Health and Ed Committee meeting set for June 23rd, and we'll be back before that.
And the budget committee will take up this and a couple of budgets tomorrow night, 5:30 and 2:05.
This is Steve Adjourned.